council's constitution, that could be 5 seconds or harder.
Good evening and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee of South Oxfordshire District Council on Wednesday, 6th of December 2023. I'm Councillor Moki Khan and I shall be chairing this meeting. This meeting has been held in person with some councillors and some officers joining remotely. For those who are not in the room, are permitted to speak but not allowed to vote on any item on the agenda. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the housekeeping announcements. Evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit and assemble at the front of the building, and there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Any councillor wishing to speak is asked to indicate their wish by alerting me or the officers by raising their hand. This is for both people in person and those remotely. If you are joining remotely, please turn off your camera until I ask you to speak. I ask everyone that everyone listen to all the debate and let councillors and officers speak without interruptions. And I ask that all mobile phones are turned off or at least put to silent. Thank you. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on the council's YouTube channel. And just in terms of the format, for every agenda on the item, the committee will be asked to note, accept the recommendation or provide a new recommendation or a motion. We will vote after we've had the report, had it been introduced and had time for questions and debate. I will need a proposer and a seconder for every vote. Candida, can we have that roll call of the councillors and officers before I start the agenda, please?
Okay, so in the room we have Councillor David Turner, Councillor James Barlow, we have Councillor Lee Rawlins and Councillor Tony Morgan. We also have online, we have Councillor Catherine Keats-Rohan. Hi, Catherine. See if we can hear you this time. There was some mic trouble last time, so
I can see.
We can see she's there. Maybe she can talk.
Yeah, hopefully it will work.
Yeah.
Audio will work.
We also have, I see we have Cabinet members, Councillor David Ruane and Councillor Anne-Marie Simpson. And officers for the report tonight, we have Mark Hewer, Richard Spraggett, and we have Simon Hewings as well.
Okay, thank you, Candida.
And just to note apologies as well.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Ken Arlett, Councillor Joe Robb and Councillor Kate Gregory gave apologies.
Thank you very much. So we've done item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. The next item is urgent business and chair's announcements. I haven't got any announcements or urgent announcements, but I do want to say a few words because last week we had the sad news that our monitoring officer and head of legal and democratic services, Patrick Aaron, sadly passed away. Patrick was a great character, a great person, and he's had a superb personality. And Patrick was a friend of this committee, councillors and officers. Patrick will be sorely missed, and also, and as a sign of respect, I ask that we have a moment of silence for him. Thank you very much. I'll go on to item 3, which is declaration of interest. And this is to receive declaration of disposable pecuniary interest and other registrable interests that councillors may have that may conflict with any items on the agenda. Do I see any declaration of interest, conflict of interest? I see none. Thank you. The next item is item 4, which is minutes, and in your report it's pages 3 to 8, and it's to adopt and sign as a correct record the committee minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2023. What I will do, I will page through them, and if there's any comments, amends or questions, then please raise it at that particular point, and then afterwards, if it's all approved, I will sign the minutes. So page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4.
Was page 3 the one with the point about section 21 financial overrun? I had a question whether we'd heard back from Adriana Partridge.
So which point was this?
I think that's in that page, isn't it?
Just so we're all on the same point.
Sure. So it's about the fourth bullet point down. Deputy Chief Executive of Transformation Operations would respond to a question. So it's not about the minutes itself, but I have a question about whether we've had a response. If we have, I haven't seen it, and that's quite interesting.
Would one of the officers like to respond to that? Simon, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, I can respond to that. What Adriana has fed back to me is that I'm just trying to get the right email in front of me. I've got quite a few open for tonight. This is I think the bit that's the issue is there's a reference to the climate team here. In reality, this was a cost centre that covered the climate team and also the insight and policy team. The issue is actually to do with the fact that there are a number of staff vacant or on secondment to other teams from the insight and policy team during 22-23. There is a revised insight and policy team structure, starting with the recruitment of a team leader, and the budgets are being disaggregated going forward, so this confusion won't happen again. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Barlow, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So back to page 4. And then page 5. Page 5. And then finally, page 6. That's it. So I propose that we approve those minutes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Morgan. All in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. So what I will do, I will sign those minutes at the end of the meeting. Thank you. The next item is item 5, which is work schedule and dates for all Southam meetings, which is pages 9 to 11 on your agenda papers. Candida, would you like to introduce this, please?
Yeah, sure. So let's have a look at this. So for South, the next meeting we have is the 6th of February, which will be budget setting and corporate plan 2024 to 28 approach. As you know, the Cornerstone report was rescheduled for February, so it looks likely that that will be in that meeting as well. And that's really the update I've got for you. Also to mention, we have a scrutiny review that we're planning off the back of the training we had at induction on scrutiny. We went to the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, who also ran that training, and we've asked them to help us conduct a review of scrutiny. So it would involve some kind of group sessions and discussions. I've emailed that it will be probably the 19th of December or 4th of January, but likely 4th of January from looking at the schedule so far, that's what it looks likely to be. So that's something that we can monitor on your work programme as well, the progress with that. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask as well.
Thank you for that, Candida. Just in regards to the scrutiny training and the review,
yeah,
do you want us to respond by, and then is it all dependent on how many councillors can attend, or is it who's available in terms of officers or the trainers?
So the trainer we have, he's given me a couple of dates, so I'm going to see as many members as we can attend those. But I've asked him to make them evening, so maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, to enable working members to be able to attend as well, other commitments.
Is this something? So can I just,
yes, Councillor Morgan.
Is this something we ideally we would attend face to face, but if we are unable to attend face to face, will remote attendance be possible?
Yeah, we'll hold it in here, so we've got those options if people are struggling to come in. Yeah.
So please do put that in your diaries, and as I say, I'm sure Candida will confirm the details when it's all been finalised. But in regards to the actual scrutiny work programme, any comments or questions? Councillor Barlow.
First of all, just on what you just said, Candida, I don't have a sense of what's appropriate in terms of the volume of things you have in one meeting, but I think about having cornerstone budget setting and corporate plan in one meeting sounds quite a lot. And I wonder if that's something that those of you who are more experienced than me would have a comment on whether that's appropriate or not.
That is a fair comment. And one of the things we do when we try and put the agenda together is trying to balance that out. But those three are interlinked, and hence the reason why we're putting it in there. And the last thing I want to do is us to be discussing a report twice. And obviously, Cornerstone, there will be a lot of budget questions in there. So hence the reason for doing that. So on paper, it looks like a heavy agenda, but they are interlinked. Hence the rationale. But that's a very good point. I'll take that on board.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
I had some more about the work schedule as you saw.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
And again, I guess this might come into training as well, but just thinking about things that we could choose to bring to scrutiny. The first was thinking about Thames Water. They have been brought to scrutiny in other local district councils recently. They were at West Berks on the 11th of October, and I watched a bit of that, and it felt to me like it could be something which is in the interest of our residents and also quite useful for us, given how they have quite a big impact on our ability to successfully discharge or achieve our JLP and corporate plan. I offer that not with a way of kind of being troublesome to them, but more just as a constructive thing for us. And I guess we want to bear in mind it is a really constructive thing to do, but strikes me that it could be something that we consider. And I know we have, that's the kind of thing we can do, right? Is to bring in other bodies.
Yes, this scrutiny committee does have the power and can request for not just officers to attend or cabinet members to attend, but external bodies. So we can invite them. We'll have to give them a reason why we're inviting them. And I understand why Thames Water could be one of those parties that we are. So it's just making sure that we invite them, tell them when they're coming and what kind of questioning or why we want them there. But this committee does have the power to call external parties in. Yes, Councillor Turner.
Yeah, I would also suggest the Environment Agency as well, as we decide to do what you're saying, because they are very much involved. And we have a history of inviting them in the past on flooding issues to scrutiny. And they responded quite well.
Okay, well, if that is what other members would like, we can certainly look into that and then try and schedule it into the programme. And as you can appreciate, these will need enough time and notice. Well, we can't just say, can you come to the next meeting? So we'll try and put that into the programme. Councillor Morgan, and then I'll go back to Councillor Barlow.
I was going to say, trying to get them both here on the same day might actually be advantageous in terms of not one saying it's their fault and the other one saying it's their fault. Actually being able to have some dialogue between the two of them may actually be beneficial overall.
Yeah, I'm fully aware, whoever we invite, and certainly we always want the others to have the right of reply. So that would make sense. Any more from you? Okay, Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, there's another point. Which I'll come back to. I've forgotten it right now. But there you go. I have other things to say if that's helpful.
Yes, please do.
So in a similar way, in terms of external bodies, I did wonder about going through item 7, which we're obviously going to come to. I was thinking about the SEAL monies and how they are allocated, what the governance processes are in our partner organisations such as the Integrated Care Board and Oxfordshire County Council. And given that it's quite a lot of money, I wondered if it was appropriate for us as part of our kind of governance and our project management of those monies of SEAL, whether it was appropriate for us to call in those bodies and the particular people involved in the decision making there to, basically reinforce this really good alignment there and allow us to ask questions around that.
What I would suggest we discuss it at that we get to that item, but also in terms of finances, obviously it will go through cabinet and it can come through scrutiny, but there's also, it can go to joint audit and governance. So if we're looking at procedure and policy, we can certainly do that. So there's a number of committees that can go to, but hold that until we get to that item. And obviously I'll get one of the officers to respond. Councillor Rawlings.
In terms of the ICB, I would argue that that's already been to joint scrutiny and was being dealt with there. So it may be a duplication if we were to get involved in that one. In terms of local towns and parishes, I would have, in my understanding, the 15% and 25% are essentially set by government. And I'm not sure if it is quite proper for us to
I think as
challenge what they choose to do.
let's bring those questions about the seal at the appropriate time when agenda 7, because that is going to be the main part of our meeting.
If I may, but just to back up what Councillor Barlow was saying about the February meeting, to be effective, scrutiny must have the time to address the issues. And so if it gets a massive pile of stuff coming in, the bottom line is it won't be able to function properly and scrutinise properly. Those are 3 potentially huge issues. Arguably, maybe the corporate plan isn't such a radical change this time, but the budget is usually a big one, isn't it? And then cornerstone is going to be a matter of some strategy as well, I should think.
If your concern is whether we will have time to scrutinise the papers or have enough time to scrutinise them, I can assure you, when we speak to the officers, when we ask them when can they deliver the report, that they deliver it in advance so we can have the time to read it, because it's not just a case. And this is why we work with the officers to say, when these are the items that we're concerned about or need a report, when can you deliver that? Because, and one of the reasons why the cornerstone has been put back is because the report wasn't ready. And I wanted a full report.
Indeed, sir. All I'm suggesting is that if it's about how much can we fit into a meeting, let's, if necessary, have another meeting to deal with it properly. That's all.
Councillor Rawlings, I totally agree with you, because if we have a meeting and because we're speaking about a certain item and we don't finish the agenda, we have the power as the chair to call for another meeting very shortly. So we can always call for shortly meetings.
But
yes, of course. So, if that ever happens and we need to have another meeting, I can assure you we will.
So, Councillor, you happy if I take these points to the scrutiny lead officer and we can get answers?
Yes, thank you. Is there anything else before I finish this item? Councillor Turner.
Yeah, just a comment on the budget setting. I approve today that the budget date be put back by 1 week. And the reason for that is the County Council, former Education Authority, realised that it was half-term week and a lot of people wouldn't be. So their budget setting has been put back a week. So that means our budget setting is put back a week and our reserve date. I just thought it informed people up.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Turner, for reminding us, because that came out today.
So the budget,
and that will go into emails quickly, will it?
Yes, it will go into emails.
The budget is circulated today, so it's the 22nd of February is the first date, and then the reserve date is a week later.
So it's the 22nd, I think.
Yes, 22nd of February.
And then reserve date 29th.
Yes, thank you. Okay, unless there's any other comments. Oh, Councillor Barlow.
Just a couple more. The joint local plan goes to joint scrutiny, which makes absolute sense given it's a joint local plan. But I was curious, given its centrality to our whole mission as a district, as a newcomer to this process, I find it strange that we don't get the opportunity to scrutinise it as well at SODC scrutiny. And I wonder again what my fellow councillors think of that. Or
we could bring that here, but you will have the opportunity to discuss it at full council as well, because it's an item that it will need full council comments and approvals. So if you feel we need it, we can, but it will go to full council.
There will be other stages as
well. There'll be a number of stages.
It might be more appropriate.
Right.
You could be judged per stage, I suppose, when, if it's more localised discussion, then come here maybe.
But we can keep an open brief on that by saying every councillor will get a chance to speak and debate the local plan.
Okay, very good. And then my last question is about our procurement strategy. Again, coming out of item 7, it struck me, I wondered if that's the kind of thing we'd look at in scrutiny as well. And I was particularly looking at it about how it discharges some of our corporate plan priorities from a well-being and a climate point of view. And I bring that with the knowledge of having worked in that area for about 20 years and knowing how thorny it is and how easy it is for us in this kind of room or to set a strategy about how hard it is for people to actually discharge that strategy in practice. And it might be something quite helpful for us to understand the realities actually on the ground, and that might then shape our next corporate plan next year. So
again, if we note that down, and it could be either coming here or it could be something for joint audit and governance. We'll speak to the officers and find out which committee it should go to. But as I said, that could be something to discuss with officers and come back. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I propose that we note this work programme with the additional comments, and Candida and myself and others will speak with the officers and come back to the committee and say these are which of the reports they can deliver, which they think is appropriate for this committee, and if there is Thames Water or the Environment Agency or the procurement, we can come back and schedule that in accordingly. Is that okay? So I propose that we note the current schedule with those additional comments. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barlow, all in favour to note? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Item 6 is public participation. Do we have anyone who's registered?
Not today.
Not today.
Tomorrow, yes.
Okay, so on to the main part of this meeting, which is item 7, and it's on your report on pages 12 to 31. It's the SODC Community Infrastructure Levy Pilot Grant Fund Policy. This is an opportunity for us to review this policy and to suggest any recommendations or ask questions before it goes on to Cabinet. So is Councillor Barker online? Councillor Barker, would you like to introduce the report?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Yes, I'll do a quick intro, and then obviously happy to continue to participate in the rest of the meeting as needed. As we all know, the Community Infrastructure Levy has been very successful in South Oxfordshire in raising significant amounts of funds. And that has led to the challenge of using that to fill the enormous infrastructure gap that we have in all our local communities. Now, when people use the word infrastructure, a lot of people will think of roads and schools and hospitals and so on, and that's covered by the OCC and the health board portions of SIL, but that's not the topic for tonight, or at least not the topic of this grant scheme. So in terms of the SIL portions that are falling to SODC and to parishes and towns, that's really where community facilities come into play. But what's become clear, during the last few years, as we've assessed projects which are eligible for SODC SIL, is that due to the structure, the sort of 3-tier structure, and the fact that many items of infrastructure are not actually community infrastructure are not managed by SODC but are managed by parishes and towns, that there are schemes where parishes and towns are looking for additional funding from sources like SIL, but don't currently have access to that. And so that's where the idea came from of putting a scheme like this together. And so that's the kind of background to it. And I'll let Mark and others sort of explain a bit more about the mechanics of that, but that's essentially how this came about.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barker. Mark Hewer, as the author of the report, would you like to have any add further comments or to what Councillor Barker has mentioned?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Again, just to reaffirm what Peter Porter's mentioned just there, I think that we're very aware that SODC alone can't meet the infrastructure requirements needed across the district, and this gives us the opportunity to work with other organisations who can help support that. We've done a lot of work in making use of our own funds to deliver our own schemes, but it is very clear that there are some good opportunities elsewhere. That the previous iteration of how we allocated our funds was sort of missing out on. So it was suggested by members that this was put forward for review to see if we did allow an opportunity for third parties to make access to these funds. Just to build on what Councillor Barker mentioned in relation to towns and parishes, this would also be open to other not-for-profit constituted organisations, so such as sports clubs, who might be able to provide the infrastructure which was required to support the development of the area. The report is reasonably comprehensive, I'd like to think, and should cover the majority of the questions that you may have, but both myself and Simon Hewings are here to answer any questions if any arise.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do, committee members, is what we'll do is firstly, if you have any questions, we'll ask Councillor Barker or Mark or Simon to respond, and then after we've had a round of questions, we'll have a debate, and then we'll look at what our proposal is. So I can see Councillor Rawlings, you have some questions.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of this idea, and particularly we can recognise that the district's leisure coverage is only reaching about a third of our 150,000 population, and therefore there is a good case for having opportunity to have a kind of combined district local provision that might not be as good as a full leisure centre, but give something to give a better reach. But Mark, in particular, the question I have, because the core about this is, the extent to which it's affordable, and section 19 doesn't give me the information that I would be looking for. Section 19 tells us what the guesstimated balances will be at the end of each of these years, but it doesn't tell us what the forecast CIL income will be in those years, and it doesn't tell us what the deductions being made for planned expenditure are. And actually, as regards expenditure going forwards, I would suggest that which SODC spends on its own assets be separated from the expenditures on towns, parishes, clubs, and all those other things that we're referring to here, so that we can see a very clear analysis. And one of the reasons I'm asking this is because there was quite a debate last time I was looking at this, as between looking backwards and saying we've had quite a huge stream of CIL income, things are looking good, and then some of the planners looking at the local plan and saying, oh my God, we're coming to a stage in the local plan where we're only got, substantially strategic sites, and they explicitly don't provide CIL. So we're going to have to factor that into our forecasts, and it would be helpful to see that sort of laid out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rawlings. Who would like to respond to that?
I can respond to that, Councillor Barker, if you're happy. So the table in paragraph 19 is essentially the projected end of year balance for the 30% that South Oxfordshire District Council retain. This takes into account all of the projects which we've allocated funding to, and that have been profiled over the medium financial term. It also factors in an estimate of our income, what we anticipate we will get over this period of time. One of the real difficulties with SIL is trying to understand exactly how much we will get in, because there's so many variables. One of the big issues which we're seeing at the moment is the slowing down of planning applications, which in turn is reducing the amount of SIL which we're receiving. But the figures in that table does take into account all of the projects which we've allocated funding to, and they're profiling over the medium financial term, and also an estimate of our income over that period of time as well. We do have much more in-depth information behind that, which I felt would probably overload the report, but that information is available, which sets out all of the projects we've allocated funded to, how that's profiled out over the next 5 years, and how we factored in an estimate of income, but which we've been trying to be quite conservative of, because it is very, very difficult in order to predict what SIL we've got coming in. More so sort of years 2 to 5, but in year 1 we've got a relatively well good understanding of what we might get. In fact, we anticipated that in this year we was due to get 1.25 million. We're actually on course to receive 1.3. So the estimations were pretty much on target with where we are. But I think we just do need to be very cautious about how we do predict going forward, because there are lots of variables out of our control which would make that difficult to do so.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I want to go back to Councillor Rawlings, because I know he we can certainly wants to come back to that. Then I'll go to Councillor Turner, then Councillor Morgan. So, Councillor Rawlings.
If I may, and I understand how fiendishly complicated this is, Mark, both in terms of the income, and as we always know, when we look at capital spends, there are often movements across years and so on. So, you know, they don't always happen and don't always hit the deadlines that we initially estimate, and that's completely understood. I would just like to see it laid out here. Income, expenditure on SODC, assets and projects, and then other expenditures on towns, parishes, clubs, and whatever. Those three analyses leading to the moving end of year balances year by year, because that would give us the sense of what's coming in.
That information is available and we can pull that together. If I can get a steer of how the committee would like to see that information, whether or not that could be sent following the meeting, or is that suggested that's an inclusion in the report?
I would propose it to be in the report going forward. So when it goes to cabinet, or when it goes forward from here, I think that extra information would be helpful to be present.
Okay, that could be one of our recommendations. We'll add that. Okay, Councillor Turner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wonder, in compiling this report, how much consideration has been given to the fact that 60% of South Oxfordshire's residents live in rural settings, and to make sure that they get a fair crack at the SIL money. I mean, just an example. Most of the money tends to get spent in the towns. I know we get local SIL, but that's quite small for parishes. Leisure centres, for instance, unless you have your own transport, or you haven't given up your driving licence in responsible senior citizens, they have no means of getting to these facilities. And I wondered if in your deliberations you thought about some means of helping through transport to enable people to use these facilities. I know you can't build a leisure centre in every village, of course not. But I felt for a very long time that the rural areas don't get a fair crack of the whip. I just wonder how much in your deliberations you thought about that.
I see Councillor Barker's got his hand up. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, just to come in, I mean, not on the transport point, I think Mark will have to answer that one, which is more of a technical question. But yeah, I think that's exactly why we are proposing this approach, because obviously the SIL tends to be raised in areas that have significant house building, but the SIL is available to spend anywhere in the district. And I think that's, you know, the purpose behind this, as you mentioned there as well, David, is to allow that SIL money to be used rather more widely than in the specific sites which SODC happen to own, which tend to be, yeah, in the more built up areas.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor? Do you want to come back on that? As I turn, has that answered the question?
For transport, which I think Mark's going to deal with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark, can you respond?
Yeah. What was the query? Can you remind me of the query in relation to transport again?
Well, the fact that people in rural areas, unless they have their own transport, or if they've given up their driving licence, either among senior citizens, they have no means of accessing the facilities in which we tend to put most of our money into it in the towns. And I wondered if you considered any form of transport scheme that could be developed.
We'd probably be hard pushed to support a transport scheme, because the use of the district council's allocation must be on physical infrastructure, whereas the towns or parishes could use their allocation to operate a service such as a transport or bus scheme. In terms of the ability for rural areas to access this fund? Absolutely, they certainly can, but they need to demonstrate what they're doing in order to support development of the area. Essentially, the towns or parishes get an element of their SIL to deliver that local infrastructure, and this fund and the district council SIL allocation isn't designed to enhance that or provide SIL funding to places which haven't seen development. The district council element or allocation is designed to deliver infrastructure that supports wider areas. So certainly if the rural areas come forward with schemes that fit that bill, they'll absolutely be eligible for this. But again, it really depends on the nature of the scheme, but it certainly wouldn't preclude more rural areas coming forward. Having said that, it is more likely that the larger areas are more would be better placed to deliver larger infrastructure schemes that support the wider area. But it will be very interesting to see what comes out of this in terms of the projects which are put forward, which certainly wouldn't preclude any rural parishes, providing they can demonstrate the need for the scheme and how that is intended to deliver more than just a very local benefit.
Okay, thank you.
So parishes in a line, as perhaps could put a project together to ask some funding towards transport on particular evenings to go to leisure centres.
Absolutely, yes. So I'm aware that some town or parishes use their SIL allocation to fund a bus service. The town or parish council's element of SIL can be used on delivery of infrastructure that supports development, as we have to spend ours, or anything else that is necessary to support the development in their area. So they have a very wide remit of what they can use their funds on, which unfortunately we don't have the luxury of. Had we had that, then we could make this scheme much broader. But yes, absolutely. If the town or parishes club together and they realise that that they could operate a scheme which would cover their areas and provide access to vital amenities, then absolutely they can use this allocation towards that.
Thank you. That's
Thank you, Mark. I'll go to Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Barlow.
So I've got two questions really. The first one is, how complete are the numbers for the sort of third, fourth and fifth years? Is there an element of stuff missing that still needs to be added on? And the second question is, what about the use of SIL money for purchasing equipment to support those facilities that we've provided in terms of capital grants?
Are you happy for me to answer this, Councillor Barker? In relation to the first question, the further we look ahead, the more gaps there's likely to be, because obviously we've asked for district council projects that are due to come forward in the medium term. However, more might materialise which aren't factored in at this point, and that was particularly pertinent at the moment whilst we're waiting on the imminent delivery of the leisure facilities strategy, which I would hope would present some opportunities to make some really good use of our SIL funds. And again, the predictions which feed into those end of year SIL predictions are based more loosely than what the nearer terms are. So the further you go ahead, the more vague that those figures might be, but this is the best we're able to offer at this stage. Again, the best thing we can do is have a very clear forward plan of what projects which we're bringing forward. And again, like I say, hopefully the leisure facilities and play and pitch studies will help us deliver a good scheme or a good suite of projects over the medium term or longer that we can better plan the use of our SIL for. In relation to purchase of equipment, as a standalone, no. However, if it's part of the delivery of an infrastructure scheme, absolutely. So for argument's sake, if you was building a community centre, that community centre might need tables, chairs, IT equipment, some sporting equipment. If it has a sporting element of that can be incorporated as part of that overall scheme, but you couldn't use our SIL allocation to deliver that because it's not classed as infrastructure. However, again, this would be one of those things that the town or parishes could use under the umbrella of anything else that supports development. So again, it would depend if it's part of a wider scheme in relation to this particular scheme.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I see Councillor Morgan wants to come back.
Just one further question about the first part of the answer. In terms of where we are maybe compared to last year, would you say the gap for future years is about the same, or do we know more, or do we know less in terms of years 3, 4 and 5 looking ahead than if you'd answered the question last year?
We look at this on sort of on a rolling basis. So as each year goes on, we would add into that. We are building up a bit of a portfolio of projects coming forward, and initially they all got put into year 1, but we realised they weren't all going to be delivered in year 1, and they've been profiled out a little bit longer. I'd be hard pressed to say that those figures will totally reflect exactly where we are in that period of time, because each year when we set the budget, we'll be looking at other opportunities. So at the moment we've got schemes which do run all the way up to 27, 28, but the majority of those are in the first couple of years. So I can't stress that those later figures will remain the same. I'd expect them to reduce when more projects come forward, but at the same point we might see a boom in planning again, or conversely we might see a further reduction which might reduce those. So hence the reason why we do try and plan ahead as best we can.
Thank you.
I wonder if perhaps Simon Hewings might want to come in on that. He, as Section 151 officer, he might have a more eloquent way of stating how we plan longer term.
Probably not, to be honest. I think, Mark, I think you've covered that well.
Okay.
Well done there, Mark. You've covered it very well. Thank you. I'll now go to Councillor Barlow.
Thank you.
I know you've got a number of questions, so you want to group them together if you can.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a couple of overall ones first. And you've helped a bit with this already, Mark and Peter Paul. Thank you. I'm curious about the scale in terms of what level of or what percentage of the SIL income or expenditure, whichever is appropriate, it could be both, does this £750,000 represent? Because I was trying to work it through, and it links a bit to Lee's question about the overall pot. But I wonder if you could give us an idea of the scale from a financial point of view to start with, about what this represents, please.
Based on the previous 12-month SIL collection, 750,000 represents roughly 47% of our income. So it's quite a considerable amount of the district council's 30%. So if we did find this scheme to be successful and we did want to continue to do it, then we'd have to have a real consideration about how we did that, because possibly allocating almost 50% of our collection during that year to a grant scheme might not be sustainable. In terms of where we are at the moment, in terms of our overall balance and the percentage that the 750k relates to, it's roughly 19% of that balance.
Sorry, I didn't follow that complete, that last part, Mark. Sorry.
So apologies. So if you look at what our current SIL balance as of today, minus, so it's everything that we've received minus everything we've either spent or allocated to other projects, that's roughly 4 million at the moment. So that's 750,000 represents roughly 19% of that of what we currently have available to use.
Is that clearer?
It is, and what it does for me is it links to Lee's point earlier in that I'm relatively good with numbers, but I'm still struggling to see how that links with the table in point 19. So I won't ask any more about that. But I think if we can pull those figures together in a way which makes sense to us, I think it'd be really helpful, because I think it's a great scheme. I'm curious about the chosen risk we're taking in terms of the amount of money we're allocating to it. It seems a no-brainer, but I think it's really good for us to quantify it in that way.
I think we already agreed that before this paper goes to Cabinet, that item 19 is clarified a bit more with a bit more detail. So we'll move on from there. So another question?
I noticed Peter Paul's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Barker. You got your hand up.
That's quite all right. Yeah, just very briefly, obviously the SIL committee had very similar discussions about what kind of amount we could allocate to this scheme. And although as a proportion of this year's SIL receipts, it looks quite high at nearly 50%, obviously this year has been quite unusual in the low level of schemes being completed. And as Mark said, there is a considerable SIL balance. And so we felt as at least as a one-off scheme, it could be afforded. Whether it could be continued, that's as I think you've already been asking. That's an open question that will need more analysis of the figures.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask you one more question and then I'll go round again.
That's brilliant.
Councillor Barlow.
Because it links with that then is, I think you've set it up really nicely, people. Curious about what your sense is about how long we run the pilot for and what our measures of success are.
So maybe I'll come in on that, Mark, first. So yes, it's this is a one-off for the moment, and we would make a judgment on whether or not to offer again based on what kind of projects are coming forward for District SIL at the future point in time, and how well this scheme had been received and had worked out in the meantime. In terms of success factors, I think we're keen to have a wide range of applications, so not just to be funding one or two very large projects, but a whole range of projects across the district. And so one of the success factors will be to see how many applications we receive that are valid, that meet the criteria and that are in line with our objectives as a council, and therefore whether the scheme seems to be the right thing to do.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Rawlings, I've got a couple of quick questions, and then I'll go round again. Just in terms of point 6, it says the spending strategy acknowledges a 5% for administration. One of the things I'm keen to do is try and get as much of the money to go into the infrastructure. That 5%, can that be lowered, or are you using that 5%?
One for you, Mark.
That one up?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. 5% is the maximum that we can use for administration. At the moment, we're fully using that, and as we see our SIL income reduce, then the pressures on that are higher. But as things stand, we are fully expending that 5% and could probably use more if it was available.
So 5% is max, so you are using it, so we can't allocate some of that money to projects. Okay, I get that.
Not at the moment. If we found we weren't using the full 5%, we can't bank it. We have to put it back into the infrastructure pot. But as things stand, officer time and other costs in relation to operating SIL as a whole, which is quite an in-depth process, does currently take up the full 5%.
Okay. Again, I obviously want more people to apply. At the moment, if I've read it right, the minimum is 75,000. Can that be lowered to 50,000, for example? What's the rationale for 75,000?
So the 75,000. So the council's capital grant scheme, which is already in operation, allows for applications of up to 75,000. It was considered that as this is the SIL fund is designed to deliver bigger schemes, it seems sensible to sort of follow on from there. But at the same point, we had to put a ceiling on it. Otherwise, we didn't want all of the funds going to one project, which may have happened if we didn't have an upper limit. There is scope within the scheme for with agreement with the relevant cabinet member to make minor amendments to the scheme or consider projects which fall outside of the criteria, providing it's felt that there would be a benefit in doing so. So absolutely, if someone came on and said that we only need £50,000, but we've got this great scheme which we can't get over the line, it ticks all of the other boxes, we would absolutely be able to consider that. But we needed to give ourselves sort of a window in which we're operating in. But there is scope to work around that, and which is one of the reasons why we're operating an expression of interest process rather than going straight into the application stage. We're asking expressions of interest up front, which would try and tease out that sort of information. People who might not want to, people who might say, well, we don't want to go through a whole applications process when it says here that it has to be 75,000. If it's a condensed expression of interest process, which as we're proposing, it might give them the confidence to come forward to say, we understand that these are the criteria. However, we fall just outside. Would you consider our application? And absolutely, we're keen to make the best use of the funds. And if that is a scheme which falls slightly outside of the remit, then we will do so. But it would be a regulated decision. It wouldn't be officers going off on a tangent doing it themselves. It would be a decision made in consultation with the relevant cabinet member.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We seem to have someone's desperate to join our meeting.
I can't leave. So I will try and contact someone. You just have to wait at the front door.
Someone's trying desperate to join our meeting, but I'll try and carry on. Hopefully, you can hear us still. I've got one more question, and then I'll pass on to Councillor Rawlings. When do you want this policy to go live? Councillor Barker?
Yes, so for this budget cycle that's coming up, Mark can advise in terms of precise deadlines, but I think this has to go through cabinet very soon in order to meet the next budget cycle.
Indeed, yes, we're hoping to take this to cabinet on the 18th of December. Assuming that's approved, and as the £750,000 was already approved as part of the budget setting last time round, we're hoping to launch the scheme early 2024. And the rationale behind that is the council run a number of grant schemes. Each of those require a lot of resourcing in order to be able to do so. So there's a window between other grants, and it seems sensible to try and fit in there. One of the issues we would have if we did put back the decision and we didn't take that decision in December, we might make a decision a month or two later, but that might mean a 6-month or maybe a year delay in actually launching the scheme, because we need to fit it in at a suitable time where it can be resourced. But all being well, we'll have the scheme advertised early next year.
Okay, thank you. So we're looking at early 2024. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Rawlings. Over to you.
Yeah, I think we've heard in some of the discussion why that analysis of 19 would be quite helpful in understanding both the income and the planned expenditures, and possibly in future, taking your point, Mark, in the back end, we ought to just put some pencil numbers in for SODC stuff that we haven't actually approved yet, but we pretty much know or is likely to arise. But I want to go back to the beginning and I think this is particularly related to the leisure strategy. The old strategy was all car-based. It was all towns. It was all, and everybody can have to go there by car. The point David's making, and 2 out of 3 of our population essentially miss out. They're beyond the sensible reach. And if we start to look at that node and network in a kind of cycling type way, then you see a very different picture, and you see some big areas of the district which are in the shadow, that they're just not reached. And this kind of scheme is exactly the kind of scheme, together with development and CIL received locally in some of those patches, where you could see a number of parishes coming together with SODC, with a project to put in some facilities. And if we look at the leisure facilities, the wet facilities usually lose money, and the dry facilities often make money. So you could see a vision there where you could actually get something into those shadow areas in a dry form that would provide something. So that's really where I'm going with this. And so if I'm saying that, maybe 65%, David said 60, whatever, there's a large piece of the population not being met, and having 50% or 47% vectored into this area seems to me to give a much better balance, an opportunity for a much better balance across the district. I mean, at the extreme, you could ask the question whether the towns actually should be taking from this fund. But I don't think it's right to hardwire them out. But I do think this is an opportunity to create a better balance.
Councillor Rawlings, you seem to have gone into debate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You seem to go into debate. I want you to ask the question to Councillor Barker or Mark.
I was linking back to Mark's point about the leisure strategy, because I think that's core to this.
Okay. Councillor Morgan, then Turner, and then Barlow.
Okay. So if this does become business as usual, how many tranches per year how many times a year do you think we'll go through the cycle? And actually, in the future, is January the right time to do it? Is that when you actually would see in a business as usual cycle? Would that be the window? Because obviously, organisations get set up to bid for these things. And if it's going to be January 24, and that might be too soon for some organisation, they might want to know that actually the next tranche is January 25 or September 24, or whenever it might happen to be.
Who would like
Do
to
you
take
have
this
me
one?
to say that one, Councillor Bark, or did you want to?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think we'll have to see how this one works out. And I think if we were to decide that it was a success and we did want to continue with the scheme, I think we need to do some pre-planning into when the next schemes would be. I think it would probably be because we're looking at supporting quite large schemes, and in order to make the scheme work, really, it does require putting quite a considerable amount into the pot in order to be able to access. Possibly an annual scheme may be unaffordable, but again, that's what we need. That's where we need to sort of have a good understanding as to what we think what we might have coming in versus what we've got coming out, so we can plan for that. I doubt we'd be in a situation whereby we would say, okay, and this is going to be an annual scheme unless we reduce the numbers involved. But certainly, if we did decide to go ahead, I'd like to think that if we were going to do a next scheme, it wouldn't be a case of just saying this is a one-off. It would be this will be the next scheme will be, and this is where we envisage the next one or the next one after that might come. So any organisations who are interested in applying might say, you know what, we're not quite there yet, but we've got some confidence that there will be another scheme down the line which we can go for. But again, that's all depend as to what our balances are and how the outcome of the scheme turns out.
Okay, just make a quick comment on that, Mark. It may also be that there's a dimension of workload balancing here for staff handling the different schemes, and we need to calendarise them so that we try and create a doable workload through the year.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you, Councillor Rawlings. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, just a question about the scoring matrix on Appendix A. You must have had quite a discussion on what the scoring matrix should be, I imagine. Could you just tell us something about the rationale behind it? I do know really positively that you do give a high score to neighbourhood development plans and so forth, but a little bit about the rationale, and then I have just one more question.
So the scoring matrix, it's largely driven by appropriate use of funds in relation to the SIL spending criteria. We can't lose sight of the fact that although we are opening this up to a grant scheme as such, the funds are still come with the strings attached to them in which we secured them. So first and foremost, we need to make sure that we spend the funds in accordance with the regulations, which is why there's a pass-fail criteria. If it's not infrastructure that can be demonstrated that it's supporting development, it falls at the first hurdle. So that's why you will see things like schemes that are in the local plan or neighbourhood plans will score quite highly, whereas unplanned schemes less so. But what we also wanted to do is tease out the importance of the council's corporate priorities, hence the reason why we're pushing the green element of this quite a lot. We want to make sure that any schemes come forward as if we were delivering our own, take into account the environmental considerations as much as possible. Likewise, the inclusivity and equality element as well. And I think, again, another key element of this is trying to make sure that the schemes are deliverable, because what we can't be doing is awarding funds and then schemes not coming forward, because then we fall foul of not spending the funds in accordance with the regulations. So hence the reason why there's parts of the scoring which will take into account the likely deliverability of the scheme, both in terms of timescales and making sure that all the funding is in place, which is why unfortunately we can't allocate funding to projects which can't demonstrate that they're going to result in the delivery of a project, because ultimately that then would fall foul of not meeting the SIL spending criteria.
Just to add,
I see Councillor Barker, if you want to come in.
Yeah, just to add to what Mark said there. So in column C in the scoring matrix, you can see relates to how soon the project's going to start, and that indicates that with these kind of projects, they can take a while to get off the ground. They could be a while in the future, and also one of the conditions of the scheme is that the funding is for the final element of the scheme to be delivered, not just for a scheme that isn't going to be finishing soon. So together with both of those, you can see that it will potentially take some time for this grant scheme to be awarded and to get up and running and fully utilised.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony, you had another question.
Thank you for that. That was very helpful. Thank you. It was paragraph 21 on page 18. Organisations who do not accept the funding award offer within 4 weeks will have it withdrawn. I appreciate completely the need for that. But many of the parishes who might be after something need only monthly, some 2 monthly, and some only every 3 months. But I see the need for this clause because things would drift on and affect other projects as well. So we must, when we make the offer, make it absolutely crystal clear that they have to respond within 4 weeks, otherwise and we expect them to have a sub-meeting or a separate meeting of their council, whatever. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly why we have that clause in there.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. Linking a bit to that, and also to Councillor Wogan's points about the frequency of this, I'm curious about what conversations you may have had with any people who might be potential applicants, just to get a sense of how those types of organisations respond to the proposed timetable, about the workability from their perspectives.
I haven't had any conversations myself. Mark?
No, we haven't had any direct conversations in relation to this scheme. However, we have had conversations with our community enablement team who operate the council's capital grants scheme, and my team also operates the Section 106 funding process as well. So we're confident that the timeframes would work in terms of pulling together applications. However, like I say again, this is a pilot scheme, and we do want to offer some flexibility in this. So if we do find that people are struggling to fit in with the timeframes which we've put in, or if there are any sort of issues, then we'll look to see what flexibility we can build in to support that. And again, that might build into future schemes. But it's not a finger in the air suggestion. It is based on how we deal with our capital grants and also our Section 106 funding, and some of our Section 106 funding are applications of £800,000 plus. So we are used to dealing with large applications, but again, it will largely depend as to how far in advance or how progressed the projects are, which is why I really take on board the suggestion that if we do operate this on a more regular basis, that we make sure that we try and diarise schemes going forward, so the organisation can then take a decision about whether or not that scheme is the correct one to apply for, or whether or not there might be a future opportunity.
Any more questions, Councillor Barlow?
Linked to that one,
yes.
I'm curious about where else a policy like this is employed, which other districts or authorities use this kind of thing for SIL, because it sounds a great idea, and I'm just curious where it might already be working in practice that we can perhaps learn from as well.
We're a member of a forum of other councils which operate the SIL facility. It's currently optional, so not every council operates SIL. I've only been able to find one other council who operates a scheme whereby they allow third parties to apply for funding without ring fencing it in the similar way that we do for the county council or for public healthcare. That was Cornwall County Council. They operate a similar scheme, but they've much reduced amount. Their applications are between 25,000 and 100,000, so they're smaller schemes, which, to my mind, I don't think is encouraging the correct type of schemes to come forward from the district council's allocation. but again, they're the only organisation I've found to operate this sort of scheme. And I guess the reason for that is that most councils under considerable financial pressures will be looking at using their SIL allocations in order to be able to enhance and maintain or deliver new infrastructure of their own. And they might also see the benefit in accruing funds in order to be able to deliver schemes down the line. We've put £750,000 into this pot, which seems like a lot of money, but in infrastructure terms, it really isn't. A large scheme, even a modest-sized community centre, would likely to be almost double that amount. So, yeah, I think it's key that we look at what other councils have done. But like I said, there isn't many councils out there operating this type of facility, and I suspect most of them are working on the basis that we've got our own infrastructure stock. We want to use our funds in order to be able to support that, or accrue funds to be able to deliver infrastructure in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, very helpful. I welcome the fact that we're innovating.
Any further questions? I've just got a quick question. I believe the success of this new initiative and policy is actually going to be how it's communicated, because one of the things that obviously this is new, you put a new policy and you're coming up with a new idea, which is great, but have we thought about how this is going to be communicated and what's the comms piece out there, because that's going to be crucial to the success of this initiative?
Yes, absolutely. So should the scheme be approved, we've already consulted the communications team who are already on board to make sure that they're ready and raring to go in terms of promoting the scheme. And again, they've got good experience of this through supporting the capital grant scheme, and the expression of interest process and the applications process when it comes to it will be supported by clear guidance as well. So that will be all available up front, so it makes it very clear exactly what we're looking for at each of the stages. But again, that communication will also go to all of the towns and parishes who ultimately are best placed to know what's the need in their area. And if they don't have the scheme themselves, we really rely on them to try and signpost their local clubs and organisations to say, we know you've got a scheme in mind, we know you're looking for funding, this scheme's come up, we'd be happy to lend our support to that. But again, using our towns and parishes will be a key part of that communications element.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any. Oh,
yeah, I've got a couple more.
Yes,
just was making sure that we all had our turn.
Yes, have your next two questions, please.
Thank you. So building on Councillor Turner's questions about the scoring matrix and Councillor Rory's points about the kind of nodes and the shadow areas, if I just want to check my understanding of the scoring matrix is accurate. So on page 29, where in Appendix A, where it is, if I look at column A to start with, it suggests that you'll score 9 if your project supports the infrastructure requirements identified in the local plan. So it gets the highest score there. One thing that occurred to me about that is the local plan comes around once every 4 years. And I wonder if other issues emerge during that period of time. And of course, this is a pilot, right? So I'm not pretending everything should be perfect. Please see these questions in that context. But I'm wondering if there's a way in which we allow for that in terms of maybe a great project, but it wasn't foreseen in the local plan. But does it mean it has, it will only ever score 6 or 3, and that might put it down the pecking order, in terms of the attractiveness. So it's not one you necessarily have to answer now. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just more, it occurred to me in that there could be an unintended consequence of that getting a 9 score. And you may have already thought of that through.
Well, only in the sense that obviously the project could still score 9s in all the other categories, but it just wouldn't score a 9 in that particular category around the relationship with existing plans. So yeah, it could still be a great project and score very highly. It just isn't identified in the IDP of the local plan as such. Yeah.
Can I add to that? Sorry.
Yes, you can. Go on, Mark.
Yeah. Yes. So I mean, in an ideal world, all of our still funding should be allocated to projects which appear in the IDP, which supports a local plan, because that essentially sets out what infrastructure is needed to support the development going forward. But yeah, we very much understand that needs change, and I think that the key to this is to making sure that our IDPs are really up to scratch. So I've already opened dialogue with our planning policy team, who are shortly be starting work, or if they haven't done so already, on the new IDP for the joint local plan. Really, infrastructure shouldn't come out and jump on you. We know what the need is. Infrastructure projects are generally long term, so if they are needed, then the best thing to do is try and get them captured as part of the local plan, process. However, we do know that isn't possible, but as Councillor Barker's alluded to, there are plenty of other ways in which the projects can score highly, even if they don't appear in the local plan.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one more if there's any more questions. I see that Councillor Rawlings, and then what I'll do is
I have a second one on that.
okay, I'll come back to you, and then what I like to do is go to debate, because I think we had a number of questions. So Councillor Rawlings and then Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, picking up on the planning point, I think there is a dichotomy between what planning tends to assume, which is that we want to send all the infrastructure to the new housing being built, versus a different model in which you say the district's quite well provided here and there, or there are certain things that work and certain things where there are gaps and there are complete deficiencies of provision, and actually filling those gaps and addressing those issues is also important. And my question would be on under B, because I generally think this is well scored and well thoughtful through it all. But B is the one which particularly talks about reach, and I think that some of the words that you could add in here helpfully to just improve it a little is addressing gaps of provision, so that we're thinking, as has been said throughout, you know, this is district money, and it's trying to create a district matrix which works across the district, and therefore I think it would be helpful in the consideration of reach to look at gaps of provision. That would be my question.
Who would like to take that?
Do you want to, Mark?
Yes. So would that possibly come forward as a recommendation from the committee for inclusion of that?
That may be when we go to debate.
It's certainly something that we could add in, but again, you've got to remember that the reason why we secured this funds is because there's been development, and we need to make sure that the funds are being used to support development. If there's a void of infrastructure in an area that hasn't seen development for a considerable amount of time, technically we're not spending our funds in accordance with the spending requirements. But no, I think we could certainly include sort of like addressing gaps in provision as being sort of like one of the key scoring elements.
Okay, thank you.
The only comment I would make there is that actually, unless there's some matching funds coming locally, which probably are going to have to come from development, it's not going to come in as a bid. So,
thank you, Councillor Rawlings. Back to you, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Column G on the same scoring matrix. I just want to check something. This may be my not understanding of the climate and ecological emergency language, but I noticed it talks about significant contributions to the strategies and long-term impacts on climate change or nature recovery. I'm curious, given the reality of needing to adapt to climate change as well, whether projects that help the community adapt to climate change, I'm thinking about mass tree planting or whatever it may be that local communities decide is important, how would they be scored? Because I'd see those as addressing a different need, which, as I look at it on face value, and I could be misunderstanding that, aren't actually accounted for in the scoring on G, and a bit of language change may help us there.
I think what this is trying to tease out is the fact that if the project is designed specifically to enhance the environment, such as planting woodland, nature reserves and the likes of that, it would score very highly, which I guess would kind of fall within what you just mentioned. But do let me know if you think I've misinterpreted what you said.
I think that's fair, Mark. Thank you. I guess I was thinking there may be things which aren't specifically nature recovery. So my example of trees was perhaps was a true example, but not the most helpful. And maybe examples which are to do with climate change adaptation, which aren't actually nature recovery, and they're not about minimising our impact on climate change. It's the other way around. It's minimising climate change impact on us. And that's going to get more and more important, I think we all probably understand, over the coming decade. And again, I appreciate this is a pilot, right? But it's a question that came up, so I just wanted to throw it in the pot, and it may be something that you want to consider, or we choose to consider here to help.
Yeah, just to add my thoughts on that. I don't think the wording was intended to rule that out. So, you know, I think the wording is intended to be suitably wide to include those kind of things as well.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just add to that as well, is obviously this is a very distilled way of demonstrating how we're going to score this. Behind this, there will be a lot more information available when it comes to the expression of interest phase and the application phase, which will give more information about what sort of projects would fit in with those. So again, having a scoring matrix which contains all that information might be a bit sort of overloaded. So, but there will be sort of background information behind this which will help with the scoring process, and that will be available to applicants as well to understand if their schemes are best suited to the grant scheme.
Thank you. I think we had a number of questions there. So what I'd like to do now is go to debate. But if you look at the front of your report, there's the recommendations. And just for the purpose of recordings, I will quickly just read them out. And then obviously we can add other things. So the recommendations are that Cabinet considers whether or not to approve the pilot scheme policy to award grants for delivery of infrastructure funded by the Council's Community Infrastructure Levy, CIL allocation, attached in Appendix 1. And the second recommendation is, if Cabinet supports the pilot policy, that it delegates authority to the relevant head of service in consultation with the relevant Cabinet member to make minor amendments to the standard terms and conditions of the scheme. So they're the two recommendations, but obviously in the debate we can add other comments that we want Mark and Councillor Barker to consider before it goes to Cabinet on the 18th, I think, yes, 18th of December. So who would like to start off? Councillor Rawlings?
I'm happy to start off. Yeah, I think this is an excellent proposal. I think it's the right thing to do. I think we should recommend that Cabinet approve this, and obviously Part B is agreed. It's to be seen complementing our other CIL expenditure at district level, and I think the two things working together, and we can obviously tweak and tune them over time in future, but it's the right thing to do, and I think it improves, it has the potential to improve district coverage and end up with a much better deployment of assets and facilities across the district. I think the scoring system is essentially right. I think it's been thoughtfully put together. I would just myself suggest that we do address that gaps of provision thing in column B, the reach, and taking some of James' points about G, the climate change and all the rest of it. There's also a dimension here that if we do make provision that's within the district and improving reach, there will be less of a car-based presumption in the way that we go about things, and I think that will be good for the climate, and I think it will be socially good as well. It's important in towns that we have facilities, and we recognise that there are disadvantaged people there who need those facilities, including kids. But there are also some of those in rural areas, and they can be just left aside by a car-based presumption. And I don't think that's good. So overall, I'm really positive about this. I think it's the right idea, and I would fully support it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, so just to echo what Councillor Rawlings has said, yeah, strongly support this. Going on about the gap point though, obviously, even though something may be provided in a town, actually the level of population, certainly in Didcot, which I represent, actually, just because something's there, it may not be well provided for because the increase in population. And obviously, Didcot is a large town geographically, So
Indeed, so the council spend will go in behind that. That's the other stream, isn't it?
but I'm just saying, just because there happens to be one of something in one of our towns, we need to look at the relative gap.
Completely agree. Yeah.
You know, so it's not just there's one in Didcot, so there's one here. That might well be. It just needs to be looked at in the wider picture. But yeah, happy to support and back Councillor Rawlings' comments.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, I welcome this report. There's obviously a tremendous amount of work gone into this report, and I imagine you've had endless discussions about it. But there was just one comment I'd made, which I'm really happy with, and that's paragraph 27, which states that applicants must have the relevant planning permission in advance, which maintains the long-held view of this council that if you gave the grant first, it puts pressure on the planning committee. And they're subject to local planning rules and also national rules. So really pleased you put that paragraph in. But yeah, I welcome this report and thanks for all the hard work you've done on it. And let's see how it works.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, similarly strongly support it. Really welcome what you're doing. Really appreciative of the innovative approach and the creativity. I think I'd be fully behind recommending this. I think with the clarity we have about the table on point 19, which we come to the details of, I'd also ask for the scoring matrix to have a couple of amendments to it, or us at least suggest something about on column G, including adaptation to climate change as well as mitigation on climate change. And this point in column B, I noticed that just listening to these comments, it talks about a score for 9 for being district-wide impact. And I wonder if that might be one of the things that might, as we go through this in practice, it might actually be a challenge, given what people are talking about in terms of the local impact as well, and whether that it might be worth just reconsidering, is that balance completely right? I just think as we're talking, we have loads of leisure centres, not loads, we have leisure centres, we have all kinds of facilities which are intentionally local. And perhaps one of the things we could signal here is to ask for that consideration about slightly more, with a 15-minute cycling or whatever, stuff like that.
Okay. Before I come back to you, Councillor Rawlings, I'm just going to try and collate some of the thoughts we've had so far, and then we'll have further debate. Obviously, I'm supportive of this. I think it's great, and fully supportive of obviously recommendation A and B. But I think some of the things we need to consider and include, and hopefully the cabinet member, Councillor Barker, and also Mark will consider is, from the discussions, there needs to be some further explanation of income and expenditure as outlined in point 19. We need to include the gaps of provision, and obviously there needs to be a bit more clarity in the report for scoring matrix. And as Councillor Barlow said, just in terms of column B and G, one of the things I would certainly like to be included in there is how this is going to be communicated. So a comms piece, how people are aware of this new initiative. But certainly I think one of the things we have to do, and as you say, it's a pilot scheme, you run this for 12 months and incorporate the key learnings, and then when it comes back in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, the key learnings are implemented for it to continue. So I think it should be run for at least 12 months, and then all the learnings are used to see whether it continues or if there's any adaptations. So that's the summary I believe we should follow. But Councillor Rawlings, I see you've got your hand up.
Oh, just a quick point on the district-wide thing. I mean, to be honest, there are virtually none of our assets that are district-wide. You could argue that Cornerstone is due to perform that role, although that's been debated recently. And none of the leisure centres address the whole district. And actually, we're debating how far their reach actually is. If you've got somewhere like Henley, it's right on the edge of the district before you start, for example. So I think that if I understood it correctly, the intent behind this was that it's not just parochial, a little parish somewhere or something like that. The thinking is about reaching out to a bigger community, a bigger group that might, fulfill like I said earlier, a node or gap in the network that brings a number of parishes and communities into play who were previously missing out. So that's what I think it's intended to mean. And if it's not clear, then we should tweak the words to recognise that this is part of district provision, and so we're looking at enabling the district plan overall to work.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, that sparks me to wonder if the wording could specifically include something about active travel as part of the project reach and impact and inclusivity column, that consideration be given to active travel being part of the plan, for example.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments before we try and put a proposal forward? I see none. So I'm going to propose that we agree to the recommendations A and B, but the comments from this committee, which are, again, I'll just quickly outline them, are considered before it goes to Cabinet. Explanation of point 19 about income and expenditure, that we are fully supportive of this initiative and the policy. It runs for 12 months. In the report, it identifies gaps of provision. We look at the scoring matrix and clarify column B and G. And within the scoring matrix, we include active travel. And there is a consideration in terms of the communication piece and how this is communicated to wider within outside of this council. They're the key points I've got.
Chair, I think you meant to and did include that, but under B, gaps of provision are being proposed, are there?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
Thank you. That's everything. Yeah.
Is there anything else I need to include in there for the proposal?
Just to be really clear, and in column G, I think we want the words about climate change adaptation,
yes,
as well as mitigation, just like gaps in provision and active travel in column B. That would be all I'd add, Chair.
Okay. So they're the comments, key comments that we want to put forward. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add? It's your last chance. Okay. Councillor Barker and Mark, based on what you've heard, and obviously what we're recommending and proposing, do you think that's going to be realistic for you to include, or can they be included before the report goes to Cabinet?
I'll let Mark comment on the timing for this, but in terms of those particular points, I understand what's being asked, and I think they are all very sensible suggestions to improve the report. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, agreed. I don't hear anything there that I think would cause any issues. What I would do is I'd speak to our climate action team on the wording around the on the climate sort of scoring elements to make sure that they're content with that, because ultimately we'll be quite reliant on them when it comes to reviewing applications. But providing they're supportive of that, I see no issues. In terms of making these amendments, there's opportunity for these to be done prior to the Cabinet agenda circulation. But you'll have to forgive me, after almost 20 years of working for the council, I've managed to not go to scrutiny before, so I'm not quite sure the protocol of whether or not at what point I'm instructed to undertake those, or do I need to wait for the recommendations of the committee before those amendments could be made, or can I proceed?
Okay, we will have a vote, and after that gives you what this committee is saying. So once we've voted, our recommendations is your action plan to go forwards. Does that make sense?
Yep, happy with that.
Okay, thank you.
And the Cabinet approve it, and it...
Yes, it goes to Cabinet, and then it gets approved, and then it obviously, if it needs to go to full council, it will do. Yeah. But in terms of this committee, what we decide and what we agree on is your action plan to go forwards.
So you're proposing this?
I'm proposing that, as I say, A and B and the other points that I'm not going to repeat them again.
Happy to second.
I've got a seconder. Any other debate on this before we vote? I see none. So those in favour of the points recommendation with the additional comments, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. So Mark, that's been agreed, and thank you. I just want to thank you, Mark, and also Councillor Barker for producing this report and also answering all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And on that basis, that's the end of the agenda. And at 7:30, I will now.
Can I just check one thing? Because you
Yes.
said we're going to come back to the kind of scrutiny programme. And I just wondered whether that's something we do offline. About some of the questions that we had earlier, because we're going to come to them in this, which we haven't, which is absolutely fine by me, but just they kind of what's the next stage on looking at the scrutiny programme and some of the suggestions that came up earlier.
Okay. In terms of the although we finished the agenda, in terms of the work programme, if there are certain comments that you need, email them to me and Candida and obviously Councillor Arlott for inclusion, because one of the things we have regular meetings, and any of those comments that you put forward we will consider.
I will do that then. I'll follow up.
Okay, thank you. So I'm happy to I've seen no other comments, so the meeting is now closed. Thank you. We can end the streaming.